Hey everybody. I am, as you can tell, in Hartford today in my capital, my legislative office building office, hopefully for the last time in a while. I'm here today because we had a meeting of the Bond Commission, which I sit on because I chair the Finance Committee, which the governor chairs, and we supported various investments in the state of Connecticut, including some school construction and some local infrastructure and a lot of statewide infrastructure. We also today, the governor announced and detailed some of his use of the fund that we set up in special session this last month in November. So I want to talk about that a little bit. First of all, the fund that we the legislature created this fund, and we set aside $500 million of revenues that had surprised us, really, or were unexpected, that came in after our budget was signed and completed, our balanced budget. We set those aside and gave the governor the ability to spend that money on very particularized things involving food insecurity, healthcare, school meals, childcare costs, and housing. And today he announced the use of some of that money. And so I wanted to talk about, first of all, about the process of that and how it's because it's a very, I think, useful distinction between the way Connecticut operates and the way the federal government is operating, or not, as the case may be. So we, the legislature, created this fund. We, in fact, honestly, we had to convince the governor to do it, that we thought was important that we took these revenues while we had them and held them in this special fund, limit what they could be spent on, delineate that very specifically, but make sure that we were able to respond to, and it is specifically in response to federal cuts. So federal resources that would have flowed into the state of Connecticut to help usually our most vulnerable residents that are being cut and not coming to Connecticut. So first of all, we, the legislator, created that fund, and because I'm part of those conversations, we thought about keeping the appropriation power. In other words, set that fund aside for that purpose, but then have the legislature, through its process of hearings and appropriations, decide how that money was going to be spent. And we decided that because things were changing so urgently, and the legislature's process, while it's great for a lot of circumstances, it is slow. It is cumbersome. It doesn't respond to urgency and emergent situations. And so we decided to delegate the power to the governor to appropriate those funds. We would set them aside essentially in our budget reserve fund, and he would have the ability to spend them. That is the legislature, very clearly indicating our delegation of a specific power over a specific set of revenues to the governor. We would have the ability, some oversight. We'd be able to veto essentially any expenditure that he did, but he would be able to act nimbly and with response to the facts that were happening on the ground. One of the reasons why I find that kind of interesting right now, because there are a lot of conversation at the federal level about that, whether the executive and legislative branch are totally separate and they have totally separate responsibilities and they don't work together, and whether in particular at the Supreme Court there's a case which may likely overrule a precedent known as Humphrey's executor. And the question is whether, when the legislature delegates certain power, creates an agency, delegates certain part of the executive, whether they can retain some of it for themselves. And that means in the case before the Supreme Court, whether they can say you can limit the power of the president to fire someone who's in charge there in order to insulate this agency for very particular purposes from raw partisan politics, to give it a little bit more space to allow expertise and knowledge and experience to rule the day. And certainly in many federal agencies that deal with very technical issues, that is really important, and we've already seen the Supreme Court sort of screw up that expertise because that's not their expertise. They have expertise, but that particular expertise of our agencies is not what's at stake here. So here in Connecticut, we are delegating a very specific power to the governor, and we work together. We have some ability to pull that back if he decides to spend it on something that we don't agree with. But there's interplay between the two, and we think that's healthy. that's an important distinction between Connecticut and the federal government. And the other thing that I want to note is that also in contrast with the federal government, Governor Lamont didn't just take this power for himself, which is what you're seeing at the federal level, which is the president withholding congressionally appropriated funds. That's not permissible. So that's also not happening. We are working together. We are clearly delineating the funds to be spent on these purposes, and we are, we're retaining some control over it. But the governor is going to make those decisions because he's able to do it more quickly than we are. I think that's healthy, and proud of Connecticut. I'm also really happy to see the kinds of appropriations that the governor discussed today following our bond commission meeting, because I'll put some of the specific numbers in the newsletter, but basically there were big commitments to funding of food banks to serve residents impacted by SNAP cuts through June of 2027. Also significant resources to support the expiration of the enhanced premium tax credits for those who are in covered CT through June 30th, 2027. Also, replacing fully or partially, depending on your income level, enhanced healthcare subsidies for those who are not on covered CT. Also, supplemental payments to FQHCs to help those who are treating the most vulnerable among us. Benefits for the homeless, coverage for lost federal reimbursement for healthcare services performed by Planned Parenthood, which has been cut off. Some additional funding for United Way or 2-on-1 in order to support people who are meeting the newly more onerous paperwork and requirements, both with SNAP and Medicaid, and to help them become familiar with it and understand what the rules are and get the paperwork in a timely way, and also help with DSS to help do the same thing. So really important sets of expenditures, and it's been a pleasure to work with the governor and his staff on that. I also wanted to note a couple of other local events that I went to that had some significant resonance this past weekend. Was the anniversary, I think the 13th anniversary of the Sandy Hook shooting. There was a vigil on the White Hart Green on Sunday, right as the shootings at Brown took place, which we noted were those freshmen at Brown were the same age as those Sandy Hook kids would have been had they survived. And of course, the shooting on the first night of Hanukkah in Bondi Beach in Australia, which both tragic and heartbreaking things to, not surprising, but I guess, tragic things to live through. And it was a moment for us, for a lot of people to be together to figure out, how we take this going forward. And then yesterday, I think the week is flying all together, but the Council of Governments, which is our regional government, it's sort of Connecticut's version of county government, had a meeting for the regional legislators, and they switched up the format a little bit this year to help conversation, and they made a point of seating together, for example, people who are on different ends of the political spectrum, and it was really healthy. It's really healthy to sit down and, with respect, talk to some legislators on one end of the political spectrum, talking to municipal leaders on the other, and vice versa at other tables. And to with respect, with people who understand and know what they're talking about, to push back and forth about policy and to correct some, misinterpretations or misunderstandings about what's happening at the state level. Really healthy, and really glad that that's an important thing to be able to do. And I learned a lot and took home a lot of pages of notes, and so we'll be looking at those stuff going forward. Of course, coming this week, the holidays are upon us. Hanukkah began this weekend, and Christmas is coming up this week. So I hope you have some plans for some happy downtime with friends and family this coming week, and I'll talk to you soon.